Hey guys, so welcome to our very first live Ask Me Anything webinar. Our two hosts will be Damien Murphy and myself. So about today's webinar's program, first we are going to start up and we are going to talk through the questions that we received from you guys during the past week or so. While we are answering these questions, feel free to ask any related question that you would have or anything that would arise during our answers. And when we are through with all the questions that we received so far, feel free to start posting your questions in the public chat. First, let's introduce ourselves. Damien.
Hey everybody, Damien Murphy, one of the sales engineers here at Bitrise. So some of you might have met me before and discussed stuff with me. So any questions on the technical side, happy to chime in.
Thanks. And I'm Tamas, also sales engineer, basically the European counterpart of Damien. So I try to provide as insightful input on any kind of technical questions as Damien does. And let's just jump into this. So the very first question, can we expect to have first-class support to privately shared Bitrise steps? The very first answer to this is basically about how you can use any kind of steps that you already have. There are a couple of options that you can do here. Our Dev Center article on this contains a couple of solutions, how you can use the Bitrise YML to include any kind of steps that, for example, you have on your local machine or that you have in your private repository. So just to go through a quick example, for example, you have a private repository for a specific step. Let's say you created a clone of the Xcode archive step, and you would like to use that in your workflows on Bitrise. The only thing that you would need to do in this case is you would need to make sure that the same SSH key is added to that private repository of the given step as well. And when you added that, you would be able to simply paste the SSH URL of that given step within the Bitrise YML in a specific format. And during the build, the Bitrise CLI would see that you have a specific step repository associated with this given step. The CLI would pull down that repository and run that given step. So you wouldn't need to share within the step library the given step. You wouldn't need to make sure that it is uploaded to Bitrise somewhere. You would simply be able to use a private repository to have that in there. Also, another option that I would like to highlight here is you can also reference steps with a local path. So meaning, let's say you have specific steps that are related only to a specific repository or a specific app that you are building. It would be pretty easy to simply just clone that given repository. And on Bitrise, within the Bitrise YML, you can simply specify the given path to that given steps folder within the Bitrise YML. The Bitrise CLI would check that given path, and it would run the given step from that path. Okay, moving on to question 2.
Yeah, so I'll take this one. So do you have plans to provide some kind of dashboard with metrics per app, e.g., total number of builds in a given time frame, average build time per workflow, etc.? So yeah, we do have an upcoming insights dashboard, and yeah, that will basically put all of this data in front of you inside the application. But in the meantime, we do have a Bitrise API, and that API provides raw data for all of your builds, your apps. It's pretty extensive, and you can even connect it to a Grafana dashboard today. There's a link there to the Grafana dashboard, and I can share my screen and show you what that would look like. So this Bitrise Grafana API, it's basically an API wrapper around a Bitrise API that transforms the data into time series data between two dates. So you can follow the instructions here to set it up. It's pretty easy. You can just click the run on REPL, and what that will do is it will automatically spin up a web server for you in REPL, and then you can connect that to your Grafana dashboard. So here you can see I've got a list of builds. I've got some stats about them as well. So depending on which workflow it was, which branch, which stack, and you can configure exactly what you want to display here. And then we also have timings over time, so how long the build took, over time. And then here as well, we can see build queues. So if you run out of concurrencies, you might see build queues, and this will help you visualize it. And you can also customize this yourself, move it around, do pretty much anything you want, and then select between date ranges as well. So all of that is handled by this code. So if you wanted to make changes, say to the stats, you can actually do that all in here as well. So a good example here is the ability to take everything except for a master and dev branch and combine them into a single other branch. So that's what you actually see there as well. So that's pretty handy. It's open source, so you can take it and modify it and do things that you like. One of the other cool functionalities that we have is the ability to create a Slack alert bot. So this is just a simple rules engine. Again, you'll find it in the same account as the dashboard. And with the rules engine, you can use the Bitrise API with webhooks and basically add that on Bitrise. And what that will actually do is it will trigger alerts when a given rule is hit. So to take a quick look at what the rules engine looks like, you can see here I've got a couple of rules where if the average build time is exceeded by 50%, if the build is running below a certain threshold, if an aborted build was detected for a reason other than rolling builds or manual abort, build queue time exceeds 10 minutes. And you can set that up, run your own instance of it on REPL, and that will post it into your own Slack dashboard or your own Slack workspace. Cool. So let me stop sharing. Okay. Any questions on that before I move on? It doesn't look like it. Okay. I think I'll hand it back over to you, Tamas.
Thank you. So the next question, can we expect to have more concise Bitrise YML files in the future? For example, by having things like workflows defined per file and include directives. I would say that these would mainly be feature requests. And we are continuously looking at how we would be able to improve Bitrise, how we can make Bitrise a better fit for our mainly developer audience. I'm just quickly going to share my screen because there is a new feature that ties into this quite heavily. Yeah, so some of you might have noticed that there's a new part of the Bitrise workflow editor since a couple of days back now. On the Bitrise YML tab, you would be able to select two different options. So let's say we have a repository where we are currently keeping the Bitrise YML, and we are editing it by going through the same pull request processes that the repository itself does as well. So I'm just going to quickly switch here. You can see here that the Bitrise YML file is added to the sample repository. And I'm just going to switch back right here. And I'm going to switch back to the store on Bitrise IO option. So currently, the Bitrise YML itself is stored on bitrise.io, meaning that we would be able to modify the Bitrise YML within the repository in any way we would like to. If I'm just going to switch to the Workflows tab, you can see that I have an option to, let's say, edit these test cases. And just save it. Yeah, and yeah, my machine is a bit slow. Sorry for that. So we are saving the repository. Sorry, we are saving the Bitrise YML that is stored on bitrise.io. Switching back to the Bitrise YML tab, after it is loaded, you can see that the change that we made is reflected here in the Bitrise YML as well. Just to make it a bit more obvious, I'm going to quickly go here, switch to deploy workflow, and delete the very first step just to make sure that my good friend Damien's workflow wouldn't be working anytime soon if we leave this configuration in this way. So you can see that the activate SSH key is missing here. And now what we are going to do is we want to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. So we are going to link the edit of the Bitrise workflows to a Bitrise YML that is stored within the repository that goes through all the usual PR review workflows that we have internally to make sure that there's always another eye that also checks changes to the Bitrise YML and that we have all the checks running on the repository that are required. I'm just going to update it real quick. And you can see that the activate SSH key is back and the day is saved and we have a functioning workflow again. So just to go here back to the workflow editor, I'm going to try and edit one of these workflows again. And when I try to save the workflow, you can see that there is a pop-up displayed that you should try and edit the workflow from the Bitrise YML in the repository. And moving back to the presentation. Yeah, besides that, there are, of course, also a couple of really nice use cases that we can further improve our Bitrise YML handling on. And we have a couple of these feature requests that we are already looking into, but we don't really have an ETA on these at the moment. Switching to question number 4. Can we have options to manage users, roles, and groups using the Bitrise REST API? Currently, that isn't available. And basically, I would say this would be a really awesome addition as a feature request. And we already submitted this to our teams. So we are going to look into this. So for the time being, the only way to manage specific users' roles and groups would be via the UI. We are also working on SAML SSO as well. Currently, as most of you who already used SAML SSO would know, we are currently only supporting authentication, which would mean that, for example, every new user that is created by a SAML login would be added to the same user group. We are planning to update this to support authorization as well, which would mean that you would be able to assign users coming from SAML to different user groups as well. So there are quite a few planned updates on this front as well. And I think this question's for you, Damien.
Yeah, thanks, Tomas. So, can we expect to have start, build, wait for build steps in a more friendly way to use? So there is a lot going on at the moment around this very topic. So we already added some really awesome features to both steps, and there is a new feature coming soon, which is pipeline management, which will make it a lot easier to visualize that process. But some of the new additions that we added to the Bitrise start and wait for build steps is the ability to fail fast. So, if you fan out and you start multiple workflows and one of those workflows fails, you might not want to wait for all the other workflows to finish. So what you can do is you can enable a setting, and I'll show you that in a second, where it will basically abort all of those builds. We also added the ability to save the artifacts from those started builds. So, if you start a unit test, a code coverage, a UI test, a linting, and you want to bring all of that data back to the primary build, it's really easy now. You can just specify a folder location, and the step will automatically download those artifacts for you. And then something that we're working on at the moment is parameterized build environment variables. So currently you can pass like the same environment variable to all your started workflows. But we noticed that there was, a need to be able to parameterize certain workflows and start the same workflow multiple times, just with different settings. So that's something I can show you now as well. So here we have the Bitrise start build step. All the typical settings, right? Set your access token, add your workflows, test UI, unit test, code, cove. And then when all of these run, you might want to actually save the artifacts that come from them. Now you can do this both in the start build if you're not waiting. So if you do wait for the builds, then you can download them here. But typically people will use the Bitrise wait for build step. And that's where you can say, okay, I want to save all of those artifacts into my temp folder. And then this is the option here if you want to abort if any of them fail. So if you do want to fail fast, you can just toggle that on to yes. And if any of, say, 5 workflows fail, it will instantly abort all of the other 4 workflows. And then this step that I'm working on at the moment, this is basically going to enable you to pass environment variables of different value using a pipe format, where you basically pipe a key value pair JSON object into the same workflow. So, rather than having, 6 different workflows where the only difference is like one number, I can tell it, hey, let's pass shard 0 into this one and shard 1 into that one. So I have this working, and we have a pull request open for it. So hopefully we get that in the near future. So there's a lot coming. There will be some cool updates to how we manage the actual workflows here. So rather than, having the only visualization be the name, and then having to jump into the fan out, we'll actually have it so that you can visualize all of that together, like a proper pipeline stage. All right. So Tomas, I think this one's for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when do you update Flutter to the newest version? Is there a roadmap after a new Flutter release when the update is on the Bitrise machines? We have good news about this. It is planned to be updated to the latest version next week. Uh, Just to provide some insight on how we are updating Flutter itself, because the Flutter install step has an option to install a specific Flutter version, we aren't updating the Flutter version installed on the virtual machines right away. Of course, if, for example, your product would require using the latest version right away on the machine, feel free to ping us. Make sure to submit a request to update the Flutter version on the build machines. But currently, we are basically doing this based on feature requests from people who are using Bitrise at the moment. Can you tell me if I want to log in multiple Apple ID for a single app? How can I do that in Bitrise? We are an organization that has many white label apps. Each customer has their own accounts with which we sign the app. We are using the combination of Bitrise and Fastlane. Fastlane match signs and archive the app. Bitrise distributes it and upload to an FTP. Just to highlight the basically results of the latest WWDC, Apple released more than 200 new App Store Connect APIs, and our teams are continuously working on uh, basically integrating these APIs into Bitrise features as well. We are currently working on supporting as many App Store Connect accounts as possible as well. And we are continuously working on providing a solution where you can use the default Apple provided APIs to basically handle anything that is App Store Connect related. Just in general about white label apps, there are a couple of approaches that uh, that can be used in these cases. Uh, Fastlane Match would be a really awesome approach where you are basically handling all the provisioning profiles and build certificates um, within repositories. And basically, Fastlane Match would be able to pull these and install those on the build machines. But there are also a couple of other options. For example, if your customer would only provide a URL to the given certificates and provisioning profiles, you would be able to update the install certificate and provisioning profile step within Bitrise with your own URL that you would like to use. Um, this would make it quite easy if Bitrise servers already have access to the location where you are storing the certificates and the provisioning profiles. Uh, quite easy or interesting use case for this could be to simply have some kind of a JSON file where you would be able to store all the given flavor specific um, environment variables, like where the certificate is stored, where the provisioning profiles are stored, what is the password, what kind of assets you would need to download for that given flavor. And on Bitrise, you would be able to simply use either one workflow that would be able to start up multiple other workflows and determine which flavor those new started workflows would need to handle. Or you would be able to simply just um, make sure that given workflows are different and are aware of which workflow and which flavor they would need to build. Now we can switch to the chat.
I can probably take this one, Tomas. Um, so one of the big selling points of Bitrise is that we're mobile focused, and what that means is that it was built by mobile developers for mobile developers. So if you're a mobile developer and you need access to Xcode betas so that you can submit them, for testing to your testers, you're going to need the latest Xcode beta, as soon as it comes out. And that's something that, Bitrise really prides itself on, is getting those Xcode betas, within 48 hours of the release, be it holidays or weekends or whenever it happens. We'll always get those out so that you can, test on the latest software available. And then also, we have a wide variety, over 300 custom steps and integrations. And these custom steps and integrations are all mobile focused. So, you're going to get a very focused platform for mobile. And we've built a lot of things into the platform to really make it easy for mobile developers to get up and running. So if you use Bitrise, you're probably familiar with a lot of the features and functionality that we have. And it really is easy, like 5 minutes to get set up. Anything you'd like to add there, Tamas?
I think you already highlighted all the most crucial things. Moving on to the next question. So on Bitrise, can we use our in-house dependency management system, which is behind the VPN, to resolve all dependencies rather than going to internet repositories? Yes, so there are a couple of possible solutions here. Just to highlight, one option would be to use the Bitrise cache as well. For example, for Android builds, you would be able to cache Gradle dependencies. We saw in the past that when there are some kind of issues with the internet repositories where Android dependencies would be stored, having the cache and having all the dependencies basically cached there can make sure that you don't see any kind of build failures due to an outage on any other dependency hosting solution. You mentioned that you are using a VPN solution to access your internal networks. Of course, you would be able to use that as well. So Bitrise also provides basically a script step, for example. You would be able to implement any kind of VPN solution within a script step. If you already have a script for connecting to your system's VPN, you would be able to simply copy paste that. But there are also a couple of VPN options as well that you would be able to use. You can simply add those steps to your Bitrise workflow, make sure that you fill out the required inputs of the steps, and the Bitrise build machines would be able to connect to your internal network after that.
Yeah, so convenience feature request, updating steps is tedious. Is there an existing way or plan to allow us to update all instances of a step? Yeah, so this is actually one of the core features of Bitrise, and I can share my screen to help you understand what I mean. This is a really simple example of a script step. So all the step does is it echoes a message, but you can imagine that this is actually, a complex script that you use in many of your apps. And then the step.yml is what tells Bitrise an input to your step. So you can see here I've got an input, which is a message. And then that actually will populate the script with an input. So this is an example of how I could leverage this step in my own workflow. So if I go over here and I add this step, and let's just add it here, save that. Yeah, so I have this simple script step example now, and I can input my message to print out. Now, the great thing is that, if I use this in a different app, if I use it in a different workflow, if I modify this repository and I update its functionality, in here, that will actually change and propagate to all other workflows and apps that use it. Now, if you want to use an existing step as a basis for what you're doing, pretty much every step has a GitHub repository, and you can click that. You can fork the step. You can make changes to it, and they're all going to have this step.yml. And the step.yml just tells Bitrise, okay, what are we going to display in the user interface, and what is supported by this step. So that can be a really good way of doing it. Now, if you have more than one step and you want to reuse, multiple steps, one of the things you can actually do is to create utility workflows. So, let's say we create a setup utility workflow. Now I can add a couple of steps here. So let's do an SSH key and a git clone, and we'll even do a cache pull. So now with my setup workflow, I can go back to this previous workflow and I can actually delete these first couple of steps, right? And I'll even delete my script step. Now with the add workflow before, I'm able to select that setup workflow, and it's going to roll up that workflow here. So if I ever make changes to these 3 steps, that can be propagated across all of my workflows that use that setup rollup. So it's a pretty powerful way to do it. But yeah, I definitely recommend checking out, building your own steps. And this is a really great, simple example. It's basically a hello world bare minimal example, and you can add it into your application like that.
Any chance in the future that Bitrise will be able to integrate with Gradle Enterprise? To be honest, this is a topic that comes up from time to time. We are looking into possible ways that we would be able to speed up Android builds, and what would be the most efficient way to do that. We don't really have an ETA on this, but our teams already have a couple of tickets for investigating in any kind of integration with Gradle Enterprise, especially in regards to caching. So yeah, just to sum it up, there is a chance. Sadly, we don't really know an ETA for this, but this is something that we are definitely keeping an eye on, and that we are trying to track how many of our customers would require this.
Right, I can probably take this one off if you like. Although it is addressed to you, but yeah, if you need any tips, let me know.
All right, so whether we have option to send consolidated emails having URL of builds created using separate workflow, which was triggered using a curl from another workflow, or we need to update the installed URL to own API and trigger email from some other web API. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, Damien, or Summit. This question would be if, for example, is there a possible way to generate, let's say, a daily summary of every build that run on that day with the given build URLs and let's say the given build statuses? Yes, so in this case, it would be possible. We also have a send email with Mailgun step. So if you have a Mailgun account, you would be able to use your Mailgun account as well to send out the emails. The default built-in Bitrise emails cannot be modified, so those are basically static emails. But you would be able to, let's say, set up a scheduled build that would be running daily, let's say every day at 9 p.m. And it would be able to use the Bitrise API to query the given builds that run on that day and filter those by results. You would be able to list all the builds. You would be able, let's say, group it in a script by the status. So you can have a group of successful builds, failed builds, and aborted builds, and you would be able to basically generate a new environment variable that you would be passing on to the mailgun step. Another option, just to highlight this, so if you aren't really, uh, if you don't really require an email notification, you would also be able to use our Slack step. I would say that usually that is the most easiest and convenient solution. You would be able to also generate different um, channel message, and you would be able to post in different channels any kind of failed or successful builds. Of course, depending on the given API key that you are using, you would be able to query other apps of the given organization, for example, or other apps of the given user account, and you would be able to generate a summary from those two as well. Is there anything you would like to add, Damien?
Yeah, so I guess one thing to make people aware of is, let me just share my screen again. So on the deploy to Bitrise step, there is an output here, which is the public install page URL. Now, if you're starting multiple, builds that generate public install pages, you can actually pull those back. So you could basically, echo this out to a text file and make it available as a build artifact. And then using the collect artifacts, in the Bitrise wait for build step, you can pull all of those artifacts back to a single place, and then you can process them yourself from there. So that's an interesting way you can do it as well. So I'm not sure what the question is, but yeah. So this new functionality with parameterized builds, it hasn't been merged yet, so it's not available. But it's something that we're working on. We heard from a couple of different people. I think Sumit, you might have been one of the reasons we developed it. Was you want to have a single workflow that can be parameterized, because creating a workflow that's 99% identical, just so that you can start it from the start build step, it's a little bit cumbersome. So we hear you, and we're working on improving these things.
Can we upload and run custom jar executables on Bitrise? So yeah, basically Bitrise already has Java pre-installed, so you would be able to also run any kind of Java executables that you would like as well. You would simply need to follow the same methods that you are also using when you are running um, Java application on your own machine from a jar file. So uh, from the terminal itself. So you would simply just need to use that exact same command on Bitrise, and you would need to make sure that you have the given executable uploaded either in your repository, and in that case, Bitrise would clone the executable with your repository, or there is another option. You would be able to use the code signing tab that has a generic file storage section where you can upload new files. And within the workflow, you would be able to use download step that would be able to download the generic file storage contents. It is called.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so a lot of people don't realize that when you're building on Bitrise, you essentially have a Mac or a Linux VM running. So anything you can do in the terminal or in the command prompt or the Unix bash shell, you can do that on the build machine in a script step. So it's pretty flexible, and even on Mac, you're able to remote desktop into the machine, and you can open up Xcode. You can look at your project. You can open a simulator. You can see the user interface. You can see your tests running in real time. So it really is like a proper machine, and that's running your build. So yeah, we do have a webinar coming up soon as well. It's going to cover some new topics that'll be interesting for any fintech people out there. So yeah, if you've any other questions, feel free to send them on. And this just doesn't end here. You can always reach out to us on chat support. Send us an email. We love hearing your feedback and feature requests, so keep them coming. And we also have a Bitrise user group on September 10th, which is going to be pretty cool. If you haven't attended a bug, it's always community driven. So it's all of you that basically are doing the bugs, which is pretty cool. Quite a big Bitrise community out there, and everybody works together. So, anything else from you, Tamas, that you want to cover?
I just simply would like to thank everyone who joined us today. It was really awesome reading your questions and seeing how advanced Bitrise use cases are nowadays. And it's really awesome that you guys are basically challenging us to further explore our own product as well and how we can better use our product. This is really awesome, and this is something that I really love, working in a such community-backed product that everyone tries to form the product itself to better suit their own ways. And this is making Bitrise better and better day by day. So thank you so much, guys, for all this.
Yeah, thanks for everybody for submitting your questions. We couldn't have done this without you, right? So it's been fun.
Bye, guys.